Drivers and angle of attack. Now, this is a massive question we get asked an awful lot about what is best. And ultimately, there are multiple answers to that, but depending on how you naturally deliver the club. But in terms of what does the varying angle of attack do to ball flight, well, that's what we'll go through and explain today. So one of the key things is drivers have got bigger and more forgiving. They've moved weight away from the face to make them more stable off centre. What that has actually done over the years is made them a little bit more sensitive to how we strike them. So if you think the further back from the strike point that weight is, how you deliver the club, the bigger differential between the launcher of the ball and where that weight is. So you can start to get, with we've seen over the last few years with the modern heads, actually then become more sensitive on spin depending on someone's delivery. So why is that the case? Well, you're working in more than just a linear plane. It's very much a case of, depending how the drive head's delivered, and depending on the angle of attack, we're trying to launch the ball ultimately with the driver to maximise distance, high with not high spin. So higher launch, lower spin will always result in maximum distance. You can have the same ball speed, launch it lower and spin it more, and that spin creates drag, stalls the ball flight, and then you lose total distance. So ultimately we're looking for that high launch and low spin. But depending on how you deliver the club head, that might make it very, very hard to achieve. So throughout a driver fitting, we're looking at optimising performance relative to someone's delivery. But isolating the delivery itself, well, what does that change? So there's, over the years, it's sort of, tee it high, let it fly, always just going to get distance, all these sort of long drive cards that you used to see on the tees. That was that slogan to try and get more distance out of it. So if I were to put a fairly standard swing on, see where the driver data comes out. That's about a standard one for me, a bit of a hook to the left. Let's just do, I can't quite use that, I'll try one more there. That's a bit of a shocker. There we go, that's a pretty neutral shot. I've always been a fairly lower ball hitter. It's changing a little bit as I'm doing some swing work, but so you can see with that one, angle of attack, 1.8 degrees up, square face. So that's a fairly strong flight. That's something I'm doing a bit of swing work, which is changing my launch profile slightly. So I'll be rebuilding driver in the new year. But ball speed efficiency 148. That's good ball speed relative to swing speed there. Spin 2004, nice low spin. So for me, that ball speed, that gets me decent run out, but it means the ball, there's enough spin to keep it in the air. But at 9.6 launch, that's going to be costing me a little bit of carry distance, but the spin's good, so it'll run out fairly well. But 1.8 angle of attack, it's upward by 1.8 degrees, so sweeping up on it, helping get a little bit of launch, but also if you do hit up on the ball, you're hitting through the line of flight. That's why that tends to keep spin down. So from a distance point of view, hitting up on it to create your launch angle is good because you generate higher flight, but you're not adding spin. As long as you're not scooping underneath to do it and adding loft with your hands and rotating up. And much like if you're hitting a tennis shot, it's like a flat forehand over the net rather than scooping under it and hitting a drop shot. So what happens if we take that angle of attack further? So ultimately, if I was looking at trying to really, on the par 5 on the back 9 right place in George's Hill, it's a par 5 with a nice fairway that slopes down. There's a bunker on the right that's carryable if you get it. And so I'd aim at that one, launch it high, and get it up in the air to carry it a little bit further. So I'm going to increase that angle of attack a little bit, see if I can launch it a little bit higher. So what we've got there is certainly more distance. So if we're looking at the two shots, I think both in terms of ball speed, we toggle onto that screen, ball speed the last one 158 on the previous shot. So that shot I've now hit up on it 5 degrees, which is is reasonable bit. Certainly if you're going to some of the long driving players, they're going to be hitting up at 9-10 degrees, but that's the exaggeration of it. At 5 degrees, we're starting to get into the realms of, from a consistency point of view, not necessarily wanting to take that much further. I'll come on to that very shortly. But what that's done is by hitting up on it more, the spin stayed fairly low. So I've hit up on it another 3.2 degrees. It's only added 200 revolutions of spin, but I've launched it 4 degrees higher. So that extra launch angle helps to get it into the air quicker, up into the air faster, and then the low spin keeps it going forward. So for no extra ball speed, the carry at 9.6 degrees at 253.7 has now gone up to 270. So I put on 17 yards of carry by launching it higher with my swing. So to go back to one of the other factors of that, the consistency bit, this is where we have to play it slightly carefully. Because if you start to hit up on it too much, what essentially you're doing is catching the ball after you've bottomed out, so you're on the way back up. But as you come back up, the face also closes. So if you hit up on it too much, you start to have the volatility of the club face comes in. So the chances are, if you hit up on it a lot, that face is rotating, and you're going to bring in potentially quite a lot of shot shape. So when when I hit one like that, great, I've got away with it. It's down the fairway line, but get the timing a little bit off, and that can start to go left quite quickly. But what it does allow me to do is to get the flight up more, spin down, and maximise distance. So if I then go, I'll just tee this a little bit lower. If I then go into more of a downward angle attack, I sort of trap this a little bit. So the upside, what you tend to see on tour is if a player's trying to hit a fairway, they'll actually hit down on it a little bit. And what that does is conversely to if you're hitting up on it a lot, there's a very small window where the club face is aligned with the target because it's rotating so much. Hitting down on it more, actually what you're doing is you're able to leave the face online a little bit longer. So it elongates the time that the face is online. So it allows, generally speaking, will allow you to hit a little bit of a trap. Most of the time on tour they're hitting a little trap cut, again, keeping the face as square as possible as a fairway finder. So if I were to hit down a little bit more, we'll see a bit of a change in launch angle. He says, having hit it a bit higher on the face. But what's happened is the direction of the swing's changed. I've gone a little bit more, it's probably slightly exaggerated, but I've gone a little bit more to the left. So what that's done is it means the face, for me, I can clear left, it stops the face breaking down. What we can see is happened there, I've got a little bit more shot shape, lost a bit of ball speed, spun a little bit more. What it does mean is it's a slightly more stable club face, so I'm less likely to hit a big miss with that swing line. I'll do one more because I call a little higher on the face, just to show a slightly different flight. I believe that's popped up a little bit more. If I keep the swing line a bit straighter as well. Yeah, so what we can see there is angle of attack 1.6 down. To get the angle of attack down, my path's gone left a little bit more, so I've got to trap and squeeze it a bit more. Face to path is a little bit open, so very, very stable. So that's a great, if I'm not wanting to hit 3-wood and really wanting to make sure I can keep the ball in play, that's the kind of swing I'm potentially likely to go to. It's not maximising distance, but it's a very, very, safe swing because there's very little rotation of the toe round, and that's the devastating one. If I start to loop it, it's going to kick left and go hard. That one, if I overfade it a little bit, it's landing soft, which is why it's the safer shot to use. But what we do get is, one, we're back to that lower launch angle. The ball speed's down a little bit because it's a little bit more of a glance. And that particular one, the spin stayed low, but there's a little bit of variation in the spin rate. So from a swinging point of view, optimally, we'd look to see it, certainly at least a little bit of an upward strike because we're trying to sweep it and launch it high without the spin. But it doesn't mean to say that with a slightly downward angle of attack you can't get good driver data. But what it will do is it will take a little bit of carry distance in particular, it will take a little bit of that off. So for consistency, neutral to slightly downward isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but it will pull the flight down a little bit. If you go slightly high and loft, you'll get a bit of flare up in spin, so you've generally got to play a little bit more of a down and forwards flight. From a raw distance point of view, yeah, if you want to lasso one, then hitting up on it's a good thing. But being wary of taking it too far. Some players are naturally very up on it, and you've just got to work with that. But once you get to kind of 4, 5, 6 degrees up, you're into the realms of the face starting to become a little bit volatile. So there is, as with everything, hitting up and it's good, but in moderation from a consistency point of view. So in order to get the maximum consistency of launch and spin, consistency of direction, if it's possible to get the swing line, really anything upward, but up to kind of, around the 3-degree mark is probably a fairly safe angle of attack to work with. You can then use the head style, from a fitting point of view, you can start to use the head style to optimize that launch and spin window based on whether someone's naturally a slightly higher spin or lower spin player. But a slightly upward angle of attack allows you to do it with a consistency to it rather than having to firefight any of the launch parameters. And that's always going to result in the most consistent and repeating shot data. So everyone will swing it slightly differently. So your optimal angle of attack window will be different player to player. But realistically, from a raw distance point of view, anything positive. But anything from half a degree up to 3.5 up is a pretty safe window to work within. Once you start going outside of those, then there will potentially be a compromise here and there. But generally, upward on angle of attack with a driver is where you want to be.